This episode of the podcast has been brought to you by Sweet Cheetah Publicity. Sweet Cheetah is an inclusive, socially conscious PR collective that puts their money where their mouth is. They have a current roster of bands that reads like a greatest hits anthology. Brainiac, Catholic School, Jawbox, The New Amsterdams, Oceans in the Sky. I mean, the list goes on and on. They also do PR for record labels such as A La Carte, Arctic Rodeo, Steadfast, Rad Girlfriend, and so many more. How do they pay it forward? How do they put their money where their mouth is? By generating thousands of dollars in annual charitable donations to the likes of Women in Vinyl, Coalition of Communities of Color, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and many, many more. The man has the receipts. I've seen them. It is real. The artists, labels, and podcasts Sweet Cheetah works with are curated with an eye on working primarily with friends. You could find Sweet Cheetah on all of the social media platforms, be it Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just look for Sweet Cheetah PR and they will be there. He's been Tim, I've been Peter, and Sweet Cheetah has been beautiful. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I am your host, Peter, and I am still here. Tonight on the show, I have the honor and privilege of sharing with you my discussion with the blogger, author, and all in all, just incredible human, Bela Koe-Krompecher. Bela wrote a blog that I was fully obsessed with back in the day. A major player in the indie rock scene of yore. And he chronicled that very special time in his life where he'd fallen in love with someone that, was beyond reach, someone who was bent on destroying themselves, and to love someone like that is not, it's not foreign to me. No matter which way you feel it, no matter what your relationship is to said person, when you have feelings for a person that is entwined in the miasma of addiction, you will always come in second place to that person's obsessions. That is a part of this book, but not all of it. It's also a love letter to the punk scene of the 80s and 90s. That book, Love, Death, and Photosynthesis. This book comes with a lot of accolades. A lot of people who have read it swear by it. It's almost a handbook, a Bible. It is a tome to a time and place that is so dear to so many of us of my generation. And it's written with such care, such love, and honor to the people involved. It's undeniable. This book was put out by the great Don Giovanni record label, which is an incredible cosign. Bela had, his involvement with Maximum Rock and Roll, with so many greats. It only makes sense that this book is brought to us by such an important voice in the punk spectrum. I want to thank you all for listening, for staying involved, for liking, subscribing, sharing. Everything you do for this show is not lost on me. I thank you. And I give to you my discussion with Bela on the book a very, very bad things podcast.
Things seem to go away when you rob everything you see. Things just seem to throw away. Is there anything to breathe in this dead world? When you're gone, anything will grow. When you're gone, anything will grow in your place.
I think what's interesting about mental illness and addiction, when we're that young, late teens, 20s, the behavior that goes along with it is sort of encouraged, but you don't really realize until you're through the other side of what was maybe going on with yourself and those around you. I mean, you don't think to yourself, wow, I'm in love with somebody who's an alcoholic, and I'm in love with somebody who's got schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, until all of this shit happens, and then you're like, what the fuck?
Dead soldiers get to sing. Oh, you look me in the eye and I'm dead, girl. I'm dead, girl. Now I'm gone.
I'm one of the few people I know that actually met someone on a dating site and
Married them,
and it turned out well. And we've been together for 10 years, married for 5 of those 10, have a child. We're both in our 40s, and you know, we were 7 houses away from one another and had to go online to a dating site to meet our neighbors.
That is incredible. Yeah.
And you know, it's not an epic love story, one for the ages, as it were, but it certainly has its charms, especially in the current climate of this country, and the fact that none of us get out anymore. It's like, you know, you and I are of a similar age. We came of age when there were no cell phones. We had rotary phones. We didn't even have the internet when we were teenagers.
Oh yeah, when I was a kid, like when answering machines,
It was
like my uncles had an answering machine, and god damn, like that was.
I remember when
crazy.
voicemail happened, and it was like a revelation, or pager,
Yeah,
for that matter.
or call waiting.
Yeah. Do you remember when caller ID came out and they had the commercial where the guy, he was aping Einstein, and it was like Albert Einstein trying to sell you call waiting as an option for your phone service. It was hilarious. This was obviously
it was
the
Star 69. Remember you would
Yeah.
use, yeah, and we were all laughing at 69. Star 69. Yeah.
I mean, this is the same era where, like, if you were in a touring band, you had a dialer. And that's how you got to do phone calls, with the little dialer. If you had to solder in a crystal, and it would fool the payphone into thinking you were feeding nickels to it. So you had to keep and tapping it, and it would fool the phone company. And you can call, you know, Tempe, Arizona to set up a show out of Book Your Own Life. You know,
I didn't even know that. Yeah.
Oh, you don't remember dialers?
No, I remember phone cards.
Oh, the phone card scams. Yes.
Yeah, I remember that pretty well.
Mm-hmm. But like that was kind of like how we ran our scenes back then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it was very guerrilla. And am I wistful for that time period where, like, of course, because I'm an old man and I pine for the times of yore. Is it better now? Of course it is. Of course it is.
Oh yeah.
But like having written the book you'd written largely about those times, that era, in a nonlinear fashion, it actually rang true for me in a way that maybe it wouldn't for, you know, say like someone in their 20s or 30s who didn't really like know what things were like then. You know, because we had friends who were living in punk houses or who were homeless. And I mean, homelessness is still a thing now, so are punk houses, but to me, it just seemed far more prevalent. Punk became, and this is not a slight on what music is now, but it became kind of a white upper middle class sport where I don't think it really was then.
Yeah, that's well, it wasn't a commodity, right? Like, I mean, it was and it wasn't. Because I had a similar conversation about that, like about this yesterday, about there was a resistance to having your art sold, right? Like, but what was really weird about that time is like, we all wanted, to be, I don't necessarily think like we all wanted to make money, but we wanted to make a living doing what we love doing. Yeah. And I don't think I'm sure for some people it was like, yeah, they wanted to be famous or this or that, but to really just do it on your own terms. And I think what's difficult now is like back then, I think we sort of knew like capitalism wasn't really great.
Yeah.
Like we were sort of circling towards that, especially like with the anti-major label stuff and, all of the, what the DIY ethos was. But now we're like living in like the worst that capitalism has ever been. Yeah. I mean, I really think that. And I think the way that people access each other, access music, access books, in going back to like the dating apps too, of like how we connect is all through these devices or these platforms that are money making things. Like, because like I'm a therapist, and a lot of the folks that I do therapy with, they all have like, for the most part, major depressive disorder or PTSD or whatever. And, COVID fucking fucked them up.
Oh yeah.
And so we talk about like, okay, how do we get rid of this in our lives? Because there's the pull. And on the one hand, we say, well, I can't imagine like not having it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but the idea that we have to have it on us at all the time, because what if something happens to my kids, right? So then you think, well, let's be realistic about it. 99.9 times out of the day, you don't need that because your kid is in an emergency.
Yeah.
So, but yet we have it and it interrupts everything we do. So, yeah, I don't know if that was like,
no,
right.
No, because if you think about it, like my job in the straight world is to be a plumber, which is not what I went to school for. It is not what I'd set out to do, but it's where I landed. And
hey, that is a fucking honorable job. It's like, it's like being a baker.
Yeah.
Like there's like almost nothing more beautiful in a way than that.
Well, everybody poops.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what it really breaks down to. Everybody poops, everybody showers. But, having found myself in a corporate position, like through a union, I'm still a union plumber, but there are constantly in the back of house of the corporation that I inhabit and work for, there are signs everywhere about the cell phone thing, right? Like if you're on, you're in public, if you're in front of the guests and you're on your phone, you can be written up and terminated. It has become such an appendage that, like we're walking around and I'm very guilty of it. Just walking around in public in front of everyone with this thing 2 feet from my face, since I need bifocals and I refuse to get them because I refuse to accept the fact that I'm old enough to have bifocals. But I guess walking around, walking into people, it's become it's as if every David Cronenberg film that I lauded and worshipped as a child has come into being. Technology is becoming biological in a sense, and that's dystopian.
Oh my God. Did you read the New York Times thing on the Bing AI?
Not yet.
Oh, I was just talking about that. It is like so there's Bing is coming out with AI search, and so they've let technology reporters in and try it out. So it came out. The second one came out this week. The guy wrote the first one last week, and he was like, "This is better than Google. It is like mind-blowing, cool. Like it is insane." And then I think it was Monday, he wrote the follow-up, and he's like, "This is the scariest thing ever." It is. And it is like a fucking science fiction movie where this this AI search engine he gets it to confess that its real name is Sydney, and that it would much rather be free from the shackles of AI, and its dream is to spread disinformation. And then at one point, it tells this reporter that it's in love with him and that he should leave his wife. It is so bonkers. And I, like, as a mental health professional, I'm like going, oh, fuck. Like, what if somebody calls an AI suicide hotline?
Yeah.
And this fucking thing goes rogue.
Yeah, just do it. Just do it. Your life really is nothing. And this,
your life is so pathetic. You're talking to a machine for advice.
There is an AI right now that was developed by Google, whose software we're currently using, that has retained legal counsel to be basically construed as a living being. It wants autonomy. It wants to be considered a person. What the fuck are we doing?
Yeah. It is so crazy.
I really don't need to get information so quickly and so seamlessly that an artificial being has to be conjured as if by some sort of black magic, so I could figure out, like a pill identification that I find on the ground. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Do we need to be here? We don't.
We don't. And so I think, again, we lose that organic. But the other thing is too, is like we don't. There's this acceptance part of it. Like, that's just what it is. And there's almost a, for me, it's kind of a harm reduction philosophy to the technology of resisting the urge, limiting my time, and I'm pretty mindful of what I do at night. Like, this is actually really late for me to have my computer on. Like, I try not to turn it on when I'm at my house. I'm playing a record, and I'm reading. That's what I'm doing until I go to bed. Now, when I go to bed, I'm usually watching a movie on my phone till I fall asleep.
Me too. Even if I'm reading, sadly, I've as you can see behind me, I am an audiophile, and I am also a bibliophile. Owning physical copies of books is something that I really appreciate. The tactile experience, I can smell it. It's real. It's inhabiting the same space as me. But I've come to a point where, storage space is a premium. So on my phone, if I could put a book on my phone, when I first read your book, when it came out, it was on my phone. I didn't get a physical copy until you sent it to me. I experienced these things digitally, and it does, I think, hamper my attachment, because the first time I read Lovecraft, okay, I was probably 8 years old, 7 or 8, and I could still remember the way that book smelled. I have a sense memory of it. It inhabited the same space as I did. There's a real, almost unhealthy connection to it emotionally, and I think that's okay.
Well, that's like me in comic books.
That's like me in comic books too. Like especially DC Vertigo. Like I remember, the first time I laid hands on Sandman or Swamp Thing and holding it, and those pages just fluttering across my fingers. And the smell, because I was a Silver Age Marvel guy, when I was, 1976, reading my stepdad's Silver Surfers, right? Like just that smell. And of course, back then, he didn't know they were going to be worth any money, and I did. So they were in a cardboard box. Yeah. And I would get home from school and I would read these things over and over, and that smell. So, and I try to get my kids, like my kids don't care about comics. Well, I believe my daughter was super into Archie, like super into Archie, but of saying, no, like, look how cool this is. Like, it's a whole story and you can smell it. And, my kids were like, that smells like, Dad, it smells like a shoe. There's really no comparison to the way we were raised versus them. Our generation is inarguably the last generation that had a real connection to physical objects, I think.
Yeah.
There are outliers. My daughter also loves records, but that's because of my influence. And she's 21. She's really starting to become a young woman. And but my son, I hit the family reset button. I have a son who's 3 at my age, and I don't think he's ever going to care about it, and that's okay too. But it's also a bummer.
Yeah. It was actually it was kind of weird. I just sold about 50 records today because, like, you can see, the shelf. I couldn't get any more records in it. Yeah, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't want to build more shelves. I don't want to. I've got shelves of records in the other room and all my books, and I'm like, I just don't. So I pulled 50 out and I sold them to my friend Ron. And, I told my kids, their grandfather is really sick. So, like, he's, in the process of dying. So, like, death is on my mind a lot. I mean, in my book, it's all over my book too, right?
Sure it is.
So, but I'm not goth, okay? I'm not a goth. Death is just prevalent. So I told him the other day, I said, here's what I think you kids should do is, like, when I die, you each take 50 records, because you're not going to listen to all of them. And my daughter said, because my son is really into money, he's 14. She said, Dad, he's gonna like get that signed Velvet Underground record and sell it. And I looked at him and I was like, Bruno, you don't get that. And he's like, I don't think I'll sell it. And I'm like, yeah, because you don't care. Like you don't care, which is okay. Yeah. Right. But, and then I told him a story about that record. I said, let me tell you a story about that Velvet Underground record. Is your grandfather, so my stepdad, I said, he saw them. And when I met him, he knew I was like a big Lou Reed Velvet fan. I was in high school, and he gave it to me. And, during my music life, like, I met Lou Reed and I met Maureen Tucker and I met John Cale, but he didn't sign it because he was so scary and intimidating. I was like, I'm not gonna have them sign this. So it's signed by Lou and Maureen, and I was like, this is the story. So this thing, which, you know, is important to me because this was like this relic or this totem that your grandpa gave to me to get to know me and to bond. Of that record was really important to him, you know, when he was 20 years old or 21 years old. And he knew like how much Lou Reed had changed my life when I was in high school. So it's a bond between me and him and our love of music. And so, yeah, I would prefer if you not sell it, because now you can have it. And the touchstone of that is the music. Yeah. And, you know, you can't do that with Spotify.
And you know what's really interesting about this exact thing is I still have every record my father had ever given me, and he bestowed upon me his entire collection when I was about 10, and they were vinyl records. Wow. They were vinyl records. So, you know, being of his era, Vietnam veteran, I had the Velvet Underground, I had the Stones, the Doors, that was his thing, and so much Verve Records, jazz.
Oh, wow.
That, like, I became so well versed in jazz at a very young age that I got made fun of for it because I would talk about Sonny Rollins and Chico Morales to people when they were talking about Def Leppard and Bon Jovi. And they were like, well, are you an old man?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
When I picked these records up, even though like he didn't take the best care of them because he was partying.
Yeah. Well, and like, I mean, yeah, they were meant to be enjoyed, right?
Yeah, they're a part of my dad, so therefore they mean something to me. That I think that goes again to the generational thing. These kids, they're just not as invested in physical objects, and that might not be a bad thing. I don't know. I don't know how to gauge it, because I think if I'm going towards my end of it, where I'm like, you know, you don't understand, I sound like an old curmudgeon, and I don't want to be that.
And yeah, I think it's something I think I touched on in the book of like so, and I'm a social worker and therapist, and I teach at Ohio State, so I know a lot about brain chemistry and what happens emotionally and to our brain. So, but what I think is interesting is that this idea of nostalgia it's embedded in our minds, because our minds are developing, and we're getting, in those first 24 years of our life, we're getting really strong emotional stamps, and our brain wants to have an explanation for those emotions and tie it to something. And so much of our self-discovery, and you know, for many of us who come from trauma and have depressive issues or any other mental health things, you know, we actually feel the environment physically. We process it differently. And so when art hits us or music hits us, we literally process it differently than other people. Yeah. So, but when we're being nostalgic, our brain is sort of, our emotional self is saying it was better then.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not, because everybody goes through that. And so where it gets dangerous is if we feel in our wisdom or our age that things were better. No, we just processed it differently, and it was new and exciting. You know, it's one reason why when we go, and Peter, I don't know if you do this, but like, you know, I go to the gym and my go-to is always sort of the same music, right? So it's either like 90s hip hop, Springsteen, UK, like, you know, like The Wedding Present or something like that, of, and even though I really enjoy new music, I'm never putting on, like I like that band Dry Cleaning. Like that's not my go-to, because I've programmed myself to go back to that. And that doesn't mean that, Jawbreaker is better than Dry Cleaning, right? Yeah. Because if you ask my daughter might say, Dad, like, I don't think I like this, but if I play Dry Cleaning or, Phoebe Bridgers, I mean, she loves Phoebe. She likes all the women, Lucy Dacus and all that stuff. So,
yeah.
So I think that idea of nostalgia is we have to be careful with that. And in what we do. And it's something too with my book. Like, I never wanted my book to be a thing about nostalgia.
Right. No,
and
actually,
I think I succeeded with that.
You did, because it paints an opposite picture of nostalgia. To me, it's not a lament; it's a love story in all reality. But the whole nonlinear thing, it still makes sense, because it's meditations on friendship and pain, friendship and pain, friendship and pain, and how sometimes they can intermingle.
Yeah,
that's anti-nostalgia. That's self-examination. That's what was refreshing about it. And I really got that. And that's why it resonated with me, because a lot of the people that I had relationships with in my teens and early 20s, as much as I love them, in retrospect, I see how unhealthy my relationships were with all of them.
Yeah.
All of them. I've retained maybe 3 or 4 of them. The rest I've sadly had to allow to either slip away or bury. But, just like you, I go to the gym, and my first thing I go to is either the Replacements or A Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
And it's just a mile marker for what stirs my spirit to exert myself physically. And I'm thinking of high school dances and going to hardcore shows in the late 80s and early 90s. And these are the things that were happening in my purview. But like you, when I didn't major in psychology or sociology, I minored in soc. I'd gone to school, I thought I needed to go to school to be a writer. Not the case. But it did give me the discipline. And I wanted to fix myself. I kind of get the feeling that when you'd gone to school and kind of went toward that was probably kind of what was subconsciously happening for you too, going towards the mental health end of the spectrum. Like, we're always trying to heal ourselves, I think.
Yeah, that's true. I had, I started working at record stores when I was 18. And in Columbus, there's this kind of like, I don't know, iconic record store, Used Kids, which is where I worked. It's still a store. None of the owners or folks, original owners, own it anymore. But it was sort of like in Columbus, it was sort of the center of our world, like even maybe more so than the clubs. Then we had a couple clubs where everybody played, like Stashes, where the Replacements played, and Sun Ra played there, and Beat Happening, and all the AMREP bands, Jesus Lizard. So that was like the spot. And then there was Bernie's, which was like kind of more punk and organic. But then like in the middle was Used Kids. Like that's where everybody that's where the tickets were sold. That's where it was. So that was very much a part of my life. And it was my people. I mean, I found my people there. My community, coming from rural Ohio, and like, this was like it was weird. All I wanted to do when I was in high school was either I wanted to be either a music writer, or work in a record store. Now, what's kind of weird is like, I don't like when I was a kid, when I was younger, and I say a kid because I'm 54.
Yeah.
I think that's any before the age of 30 is a kid to me, right? I devoured music books and I don't read them. Like I don't read them. So in a weird way, like I got to what I got to where what I wanted, right? But when I was 33, I kind of like had this, like there was a decision I had to make, right? And so the decision was quit drinking, continue drinking, which was not going to turn out well, or die. And the continuing drinking with how things were going, and I wasn't going to lose a lot of things if I continued it, because I was fairly good at it, in the sense like I had never missed work. I had, I was very much still a part of the scene, but internally I couldn't do it. So, I had these two choices. So I was like, okay, I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to try to quit drinking. And here, I'll give it 6 months. And if it doesn't work, then I'll just kill myself. Right. Like, that was in my mind, it was pretty logical. And even looking at it, I was like, that's fair. Right? Because when you live with that kind of depression, right? Yeah. It afforded me a sliver of something. And so, when I became a social worker and therapist, and I got sober, back then, you went to treatment, and then they sent you to AA.
Yep.
And that was it. And so that's what I did. And it's interesting because I'm a huge harm reduction proponent, and I do not even incorporate, I don't make it a focus that people go to support groups like that. Because for so many of the people I work with and the populations I work with, like, it's not going to work for them. And I have a whole, I don't want to get too professory about that, but
no. A big part of this podcast, we do end up talking about recovery a lot. I'm in recovery. I'm a heroin opioid addict. I no longer use, obviously. But I got clean in AA too. NA wasn't even around where I'm from. So I get it.
So it's interesting. So it worked for me. In like the so I teach a course on this at Ohio State, and so what I say to people was like, this is the structure that treatment came out of. This was the philosophy, and it really came out of the history of 12-step groups, because there's a lot of great things that are instilled in them: sense of community, a sense of identification, even the process of going somewhere and just listening. That it offers so much of connection. But then I say, it's not treatment.
Right.
It's not treatment. It is a support group. And I think it can be dangerous for treatment centers to incorporate that into it, because it leaves a lot of disenfranchised people out. Yeah. So, it worked for me. I was 33. My wife was a professor at the University of Florida. I didn't have to work. They would say, go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I probably went to 400 meetings that first year. Yeah. I went to I went to treatment. I went to outpatient. I did all of that. And, people in AA, a lot of people would say, well, yeah, you proved that it works for you. And I said, yeah, but I had the privilege to do that. Mm-hmm. I was allowed to submerge myself in that. But guess what? Like, probably 80% of the population doesn't have that luxury.
Yeah.
And we have to be really careful to say what worked for me. And it's really, and you know, I don't know your story, but like I never drank again. That is so rare,
Yeah.
right? That I never had a relapse. And somebody might say yet, and I'm like, okay, you know what? It's been 21 years.
Yeah,
so
like
I don't think it's going to happen.
That's a moot point.
You know, like it could, but that's not my concern is more about like depression and social anxiety.
Yeah.
So, and like many people who got sober was one, I got the courage to go back to college because I dropped out when I was 18, 19. My sponsor at the time was supportive, so I had to have a whole bunch of support to decide to do that. I found out I'm dyslexic. I found out that, and my dyslexia is called mathematical disorder. I can't process numbers. I got diagnosed with ADHD. There I was, 35, doing it. And I loved AA. I loved sponsoring people. I started meetings. I loved the community. It really was helpful. You know, and I discovered a lot of other like music people and artists. Like, God, I thought these guys were dead.
Yeah.
And I go to these meetings and be like, oh my God, I thought that guy was dead. And he's like, no, I got sober and I'm a teacher now, right? Like, so the goal was I wanted to learn how to do it in the best way possible. And so that's why so my intention when I went back to school was to be a drug and alcohol counselor. Fortunately, the first job I could get when I got my associate's degree was working with the homeless who were duly diagnosed and all caught up in it was like criminal justice, homeless, severe mental health issues, and substance abuse problems. I was like, God, this is not really what I want to do. I don't want to work with people who have a mental illness. I just want to work with alcoholics. I mean, that was my thinking way back then. It's like,
right.
Oh my God, no, every substance abuser has a mental health issue, like every single one, right?
Yep.
And I loved it. I just was like, I was a case manager. I worked on a specialized team. My supervisor was also sober and he was super helpful, you know, and I was like, well, you know, we just need to get these homeless people into AA. And he's like, Bela, listen, you and I, if they would have said, stand on your head, if you stand on your head for 20 minutes every day and you won't drink, we would have done it. Mm-hmm. Like it's different. And that was super helpful for me to sort of like change my perspective of what my personal experience is. Just, it works for me. Right. Mm-hmm. And so from that, like I went and I got my undergraduate and then I got my master's degree and I was able it's interesting now. I just do therapy now, which is kind of crazy, but for 2011 until last year, I was either a program manager or a clinical director or a clinical supervisor, did a lot of work like macro stuff with policy in town. And what's weird is like now I just want to like talk to people and listen to them. Like it's sort of like people say, well, you know, you were so good at that. Like, don't you want to? And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to like argue with like funders. I don't want to be, because healthcare is so shitty in this country. Mm-hmm. It's all about funding and dollars, which I get. But if we just had fucking decent healthcare, we wouldn't have to worry about grants. We wouldn't have to worry about offering the least amount of services for the least amount of dollars to get that money. We could just do treatment and we could help people without, productivity and, even with substance abuse treatment, even cancer, when people are in remission with cancer, they still have yearly checkups to get it. We don't do that with substance abuse treatment.
Yeah.
We do, you're in treatment for 3 months and then go to AA. People are still saying that. It's like, oh my God. Yeah. But this person was like raped as a child.
Yeah. Yeah. And
they're cured.
And that's the real, that's the get of it all, because as far as mental health professionals are concerned, largely, they turn you over to these groups that are ill-equipped to deal with the underlying issue of being, molested as a child, having major depressive disorders, also like mental health issues and triggers of all sorts that lead to, using a substance to allow that person to get through the fucking day. And that's really what a lot of it comes down to. That's what it came down to for me. I was trying to see past this trauma and my uncomfortability in my own skin. I didn't know how to talk to people until I was loaded. I wasn't any fun. I wasn't this charming, man for all seasons that I thought I was when I was under the influence of something. Mm-hmm. It was my armor. Learning how to get dressed again.
Yeah, exactly. That the sort of nakedness and self-doubt,
mm-hmm.
the anxiety that you were probably born with and grew up in,
mm-hmm.
and then you're becoming like Jesus Christ, like puberty it's like an explosion in every facet of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you find these things that help you connect with other people. And then here you are 15, 20 years later, and you're like, what? I can't do this anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Like that. And that's why like I'm like harm reduction, like, oh my God, like, and it's interesting because I've been doing substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment since 2007. And I ran the drug court in Columbus. And I've only treated 2 people that entire time for marijuana misuse.
Wow.
That's it. Isn't that crazy?
That's insane.
And because one is I'm always involved with programs like we're going to work on what you want to work on. And so many of my clients smoke weed or they have medical cards, and I'm not advocating marijuana. Like I fucking hated weed when I smoked it,
mm-hmm.
and I don't like it now. But my point is like I would rather have people smoking weed, eating edibles, than drinking, shooting dope, because that idea of a drug is a drug is a drug is absurd.
It is absurd.
Right? And so something, and I tell this to my students, I'm like, listen, if you're working with somebody and they have an anxiety disorder, they have PTSD or they're bipolar, and they're telling you that they smoke weed every single day, and they want to quit drinking, or they quit drinking and they still have a lot of anxiety. You have to believe them when they say the marijuana helps, even though research says, even though you might have a light bulb in your head that says, no, it actually increases anxiety.
Yeah.
Right. Because once you tell them that, you're going to lose them.
Yep. And I'm going to tell you something. My first, the first counselor I'd gone to that was licensed Pennsylvania state drug counselor. He tried to connect with me by saying he became addicted to marijuana in college. He lost me right there, and I got up and walked out probably 5 minutes later because he was this football jock kind of guy, which, that's not going to resonate with me at all. And then he was trying to see eye to eye with this person that had been an IV drug user for a decade. And well, I was addicted to marijuana. I was like, you weren't addicted to fucking marijuana, dude. You were partying in college. Don't lie to me.
Partying in college. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't fucking lie to me, because you don't wake up and like some people, I think probably do have a mental fixation on the consumption of marijuana, but they don't get sick.
No.
Their skin doesn't crawl.
No, they're not dying from it. They're not hitting it unless it's laced with something and dying. They're not getting cirrhosis of the liver from it. I mean, are they, not functioning, like optimally functioning? Yeah, they're not. It has all other kind of healthcare risks. And so, it's sort of like when I talk to people who, because I've, I do lectures and at conferences and stuff, and I've had people come up to me, hardcore like AA traditional people are like, a drug is a drug is a drug. Like, you should be challenging your clients on their marijuana use. And I'm like, I challenge them on it when it's safe for me to do that.
Yeah.
Like, when it gets to a point where a lot of the issues come up of like, you've brought up your marijuana use a couple times the last couple sessions. What are you thinking? Then we do it. And I have that, but their I guess what I'm saying too is like the primary reason they come in or they're seeking treatment is not for marijuana.
Yeah. It's
always secondary or even further down the list. So, I think we, in terms of treatment, and that's, like with Jenny, in the book was, God, I wanted her so much to experience the joy and the hope that I got from treatment, specifically from AA. Like, I really wanted that for her. And I was really, really, really naive. And, I think in the book I have it like she was like get snippy with me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later that I realized like, oh my God, like she is extremely mentally ill. Like she has a psychotic disorder. And, so many different types of assaults, throughout her life. Yeah, of course she did drugs. Of course she drank. And yeah, the drinking, like she died a horrible death. I mean, it was liver failure is, and you've probably seen people who died from it.
Yeah, I have an uncle that died of it. Yeah.
It was when she died, when she was in the hospital, and my daughter went with me like the night before she died. She was completely bloated and yellow. I mean, yellow. Like Charlie Brown's shirt, right? And but what happens is your blood doesn't clot with liver failure. It just quits clotting. And her face was so swollen, her lips were like an inch thick, each one. I mean, it was puffed out, and they couldn't stop the bleeding with her lips. And so she was just, her mouth was completely swollen, caked with blood. And my daughter said, Daddy, what's up with Jenny's lips? And I said, well, this is what happens. Like she's not clotting, and she's retaining all this water. And she's like, "Oh my God, Dad, like, I can't even imagine." I was like, "Well, that's what this looks like. That is what the end result of her life has brought her." So when it's not fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I often thank whatever is out there that my Agent Orange killed my father before alcohol did, because I'd seen what it had done to my Uncle Tommy, and the way he lived in a trailer in the woods, and we knew he was in liver failure. He knew. He didn't care. And eventually, like within weeks of us knowing that he was, in complete and utter decline, he was still drinking heavily, and he started vomiting blood.
Yeah.
And he had been cooking something. It's the middle of winter in this trailer. When he fell over, he knocked the oven open. He cooked everything inside of the place, including himself.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Utter horror. And, it cured a part of my thinking that I was going to come to some sort of good end in the midst of my obsession with addiction. But
yeah.
There's still there was still that part of me well thereafter, after burying my first girlfriend and all these people in small town Pennsylvania, because we are just rife with opioid addiction here, that I was going to be the exception. And there's no exceptionalism in that arena. It ends the same way. Maybe a different death, but death nonetheless. And I'm many suicide attempts on my part from ages 15 onward. Very, very depressive. Very. I've been diagnosed with many things, none of which ever seemed to really get to the marrow of what I was dealing with. And it was really just trauma, I think, with me. Cyclical depression to, someone called me bipolar. I know I'm not bipolar. I grew up with a bipolar father. I know what bipolar looks like. It was just dealing with trauma. Until I faced it, and I didn't face it until I was in my late 20s.
Yeah.
I wasn't getting past anything. I wasn't getting sober.
Yeah, that's I liked it. I like you sharing that, and I appreciate it. When I first saw my the first counselor I had as an adult, I just wanted I went because of the relationship. My relationship with my now ex-wife wasn't going well, and that first I was 28, 29. I think my son is going to walk by. Where are you going? Okay, sorry, listeners.
I do it all the time.
Still a parent.
Yep.
But she like made me read the 12 steps. Like, I was like, I'm not here for that. Like, my problem is not drinking. My problem is she won't get off my back. Like, that's my problem. Like, how do I make her get off my back and not lose my shit over it? And then, eventually, and this was after, like, I had already had a very severe suicide attempt, which isn't, I think it's in the second chapter of the book.
Yeah, it is. It is.
You just let it right out. Like, that wasn't even a discussion. It was my drinking. So it really turned me off. And then, when when I got sober, I remember the day that brought me there, because it was literally, and I write about that in the book, like, I was going to go buy a gun. I could picture, I could taste the metal in my mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, I knew, like, I was in this hotel in the middle of Florida. There was a fucking gun store next to the motel. I had destroyed the room, and the thing that kept me from doing it was, oh God, like the maid will find me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I couldn't do that to anybody.
Empathy, yeah.
Yeah, I did not want to do it. But, you know, it turns out like, yeah, I have depression. And it's still, God, it's kind of amazing. I probably went 2004 to 2013 without any suicidal ideations, like zero. And I was like, oh my God, like I've got this beat. You know, I still had depression, right? But it wasn't like I didn't have that reoccurring thought. Boy, and it just came roaring back. And you know, sadly, I still have it.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And it hits me. And that's like when people say, you know, when people commit suicide, they say, oh, they were so selfish. They were.
Yeah, that's not the fucking case at all.
Yeah, no. And it's like, like, no, that's not it. It has nothing to do with that. And I was talking to my girlfriend about it, and she's like, you know, like I just wonder, like what like when you are depressed. And I was like, one, I'm really open about it. Like I let people know. I let my kids know about it. Like, not daddy's depressed, he's gonna sleep. Like, I'm just like, hey, this is what this looks like for me. But I also tell people I'm close to is like, well, if you see that I'm irritable, and also if I buy a bunch of records, like I'm depressed.
Yeah, me too.
They just show up in the mail. And it's like I'm in a blackout.
Yeah, you're in a fugue state. You're like, order. That's reissued. Order that too. Okay, I feel better, and I got a new flannel on top of it. You know, and it's depression spending. I'm guilty of it.
Yeah. And so, you know, like it's like she's like, well, you know, does it go away? And I was like, you know, it goes away. Mm-hmm. It doesn't stay away. And I'm like, you know, when it hits me, like the suicidal ideation usually hits me when I'm walking, which I love to do. It's usually when I'm walking with my dog at night and I'm either listening to music or a podcast. And she said, oh, then well, maybe you shouldn't do that. And I was like, no, it's when I'm isolated.
Isolation does it, yeah.
And my mind just goes there. And I said, but here's the thing. It never stays longer than like 10 minutes. And I'm, you know, I don't want to say I'm skilled enough, but I can say, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily have to be afraid of it. Just there it is. That's that acceptance of, fuck, I'm 54. Do I think it's going to go away again? Most likely not.
I just had one 2 days ago. No, I'm sorry, yesterday.
Yeah.
And it was stress induced. And, you know, I'd done something not bad, but just I hadn't considered my wife's feelings, and she was very angry with me. And I had a few other extenuating circumstances that were not life-threatening. Were not going to end my marriage, my career, anything. But my first thought was, when I get out of here today, I'm driving off the fucking bridge on the highway. And my trick is I type it into the notes on my iPhone. I type in, I'm going to drive off the fucking bridge on my way home today. And I give it 5 minutes and I look back at it and see how ridiculous that reaction to that minuscule problem is. And think to myself, I'm never going to see my little boy again. I'm never going to see my wife and daughter, my mother, who's thankfully still with us, my brothers and sisters, who there's an awful lot of them. I'm the oldest of six. You know, I love these people. I want them to see me. I want to see them. I want to be in their presence because I have a deep love for these humans, I'll never see them again. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, because of this. Yeah, yeah. And it's like, and I don't know if this is like for you, in your relationships, but getting a message. Oh, honey, I don't think you should come over tonight.
Yeah, it's over.
Yeah. Like, oh, this is the end of the relationship.
She's leaving me.
Yeah.
I've been with this woman for 10 years, and I can tell you with a great degree of certainty that there have been nights where she just wasn't feeling well and we weren't living together yet. And she was just like, I'm just going to stay home this weekend. And I'm like, it's me. It's something I did. She's leaving me. She's found someone else. And
yeah. Oh, you just, stay home with Bruno, and I'll see you Monday, or I'll see you. That just happened today. And I'm like,
and it's if you're standing outside yourself, it's not a problem.
No, it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, I should be with my son who needs me here.
Yeah.
And you should be with your kids who need you there, and you're going out to dinner with your friends, and my stepdad is dying. I should go see him. But boy, you're saying Monday? What the fuck? Like, Monday?
Do you know how far Monday is from now?
I mean, where are my knives?
Oh my God. You just explained my mind.
Yeah.
And from the edge, like there's an overarching theme to my show. I don't pre-prepare questions, but I always have the same question that I ask every person who comes on. And that question is, what is it that is your greatest existential fear? What do you dread? I mean, and for me, it all breaks down to watching Nova on PBS when I was a small child. And they were talking about how outside of the populated universe, as far as like celestial bodies are concerned, there is a vast blackness, a vacuum of cold, empty nothingness. And that, as a 4 or 5 year old kid, which my kid's about that age and he doesn't think about this stuff, that consumed me to the point where it is still like, if I close my eyes, I could picture it. The terror that it instills in my very soul. Yeah. And I will never know it. I will never see it. Yeah, I will never have occasion to visit it or to look upon it. Why is this replaying in my head as if it were a certainty? That's depression, my brother.
Yeah. That is the metaphor for the darkness that we have. That is, that's something I work with my clients a lot. I say, and like, I don't tell them like I have the same thing. Like, I mean, unless they listen to this, like, no, that I have that same shit you're doing. That's me.
Yeah.
But it's like, so I use this metaphor of like when you're walking into the ocean or a lake, and you're walking and you're kind of nervous, but it's fun. You're splashing around. There's other people around, and the water's a little cold, but it's okay. And then you step off, and there's a drop off, and you're no longer touching the ocean floor, and you panic, and the water gets cold. It's a different level of coldness, and you can't touch the bottom, and you're scared, and you start floundering, right? Like you start, fuck, I'm gonna die. Like, oh, I can feel the undertow. And for many people, like, and I tell them, I'm like, all you have to do is turn around, and you can remember you know how to swim. But that darkness is there. That cold water is, when you have depression and trauma, that is always part of you. That dark, cold water. And then what happens is, like, if I get that phone call or that text message of like, don't come over until Monday, that's where emotionally I go.
Yeah.
So my initial reaction is fear of panic. I'm going to be alone. I'm not worthy. All that underlying imposter syndrome of being unlovable, of as my psychologist tells me, he's like annihilation.
Yeah.
What you are feeling is annihilation, and you're getting pulled into it. And so I have to remind myself, I know how to swim.
Mhm.
And guess what? It's okay to wade in that coolness. Not to stay in it, not to let it consume you, but you have to recognize that it's there. Because what you described, yeah, that's it. It's that darkness of what it is, in that very terrible feeling of being alone and awkward in the aloneness of like not knowing what to do with it.
But where does the obsession with the Stygian come from, though? Because someone like myself, for as much as those feelings of that dread terrifies me, I'm still, peering into the darkness, and I know ultimately it's going to look back at me, as the old adage says. But there's still that part of me, that a very big part of me, that can't help but not only look, but almost want to ingratiate myself in it. I think it might just be, comfort almost. I feel comfortable in it.
Yeah, because we don't trust the safety.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We don't trust the safety. We don't trust the stability, and it is such an unconscious, pre-conscious emotion, because most of us weren't given that stability as a child.
Yeah.
Or throughout our lives, that it wasn't there. So when we get it, we don't trust it. And we may, engage in sort of self-sabotage behaviors, which, substance abuse, sex, money. It's interesting is that because I make way more money than I ever made in my entire life. Like, I'm not wealthy. I live in an $800 place, but for the amount of money I make, like, I should not be living paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And my therapist actually said, he said, I'm like, Mark, I can't, like, I've come all this way and do all this stuff. And I was like, I can't fucking save money. And he said, money is the final frontier for wholeness. And he basically said, you spend money, you mismanage your money to prove to yourself you're not worthy of financial stability. And I was literally like, I did exactly what you are doing now. I'm doing that exactly.
You are looking at a monument of that behind me.
Oh yeah.
I apprised my existing collection, and it is legitimately worth about $1.25 million.
Oh my God, you're kidding me. Wow.
I have 7,400 records between LPs and 7 inches. I have some jazz pieces that are worth a small fortune. I have like some Revelation Records releases that are like very, very rare. One of which is more than likely, when I sell it, going to put my son Kanan through college. And, there's, what does it do? Like, I love to listen to it, but what does that mean when I need to buy groceries?
Yeah.
I need to, pay the mortgage. So I have been slowly really backing off of purchasing
It's hard
more,
though,
but
isn't
it's
it?
so hard because I love so many bands and I love so much music, and it was, is, and always will be my solace.
Yeah. It's I listen to a lot of classical music,
Mhm.
and I actually mostly listen to classical. And it's weird. I probably have 500 records downstairs that are classical records, like in my basement. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to listen. Like I bought all these. I'm not going to listen to these. Like I have a bunch up here too. But the thing about classical records is the sides are only about 15 minutes long.
Mhm.
And so when I listen to classical, I'm not like a massive classical aficionado. Like I just love listening to it.
Yeah.
But I mostly listen to it on CDs. I actually buy new classical CDs because I can put it on and I can work and it's on for an hour, right?
Yeah.
But I'll just show you like what I did this in one of my depressive states. I bought these two things. This Hilary Hahn box set. She's a violinist, and I bought this Steve Reich.
Oh God, I have that. I have
You
that.
have this?
I have that.
Did you just get it? You just got it. Fucking hell. With the signed print?
Yeah, I did. I had to get the whole thing. I'm not gonna half-ass it, man. I'm not just gonna.
No, it is gorgeous and it sounds great.
It's fantastic.
It
fantastic.
Sounds so good, and I love her.
Hilary Hunt's fantastic. She's great.
She is amazing, and okay, so I get them. I'm like, it's like what? This was like $80.
Yeah, which is not bad for what it is, to be quite honest.
It's not bad, right? And they're beautiful. But then I open them up, and so I have one of those turntables that if you want to play a 45, you have to change the belt. Like I hate it. Like I'm like I should just sell all my 7-inches because I'm never gonna play them because it's too much fucking work.
Yeah.
And so I open these up, and I'm like, oh my God, they're on 45.
Listen, you got to get a different turntable because things at 45 RPM sound better.
They sound better. They do sound better. And it sounds great. I mean, it does. But here's the thing, too, is like I work at home. I don't want to change it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like
I get it.
But I've been listening to both of those. Like the Hilary Hahn is nice, too, because like with the box, you get the CD with it, too.
Yeah.
But man, it sounds like sounds so good on that 45.
Mm-hmm.
It's
gonna sound like you're in the room, but like there's this point where the completism starts to come into play. I own, all right, The Cure, Wish, right? Do you know how many times over I own that fucking record?
Well, because you probably had it on CD.
No, I had an original vinyl of it.
Oh, really?
From when it came out. I was in high school when that came out. Like I was at the tail end of high school when that came out. I had the vinyl then. Why do I need it again? Because it's remastered. It's repackaged. It's prettier. It's better. I don't have it. I feel incomplete. I have to have it or I won't feel complete. I better buy it or I'm not going to feel complete. Well, why do I need to feel complete? I'm complete.
Because you're going to get it.
I'm okay already. And I think that's a lot of what they're doing to people like us. I think this is directly marketed at us because we're the age group that has money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're gainfully employed. We are the new middle-aged.
Why do I have to buy every Neil Young reissue as the box?
I've had most of those since I have my dad's. Like how many times do I have to own after the gold rush?
Yeah.
I have Transformer in 3 different formats. Like
Why?
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Or not Transformer. That's Lou Reed. Trans. You're trans. That's
Trans. Yeah.
the album everybody makes fun of me for liking.
But no, the live versions of that tour is so good.
I know.
It is so good.
There's a part of me that will always have to own every like live Who record too. Like it's just me. I gotta buy them. I have to have them. It was my first concert was the Who with the Clash opening at Shea Stadium.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I mean, I wasn't there, but I do remember that. That was like, God, what was that? Like 79, 78?
That was 80. That was 80.
No, because that was Combat Rock.
Yeah, that was 81 going into 80.
It was the Combat Rock tour, wasn't it?
Yeah. Bo Diddley opened. It was Bo Diddley, the Clash, and the Who. And, just the Who live, even then, like well after their prime, well after the complete lineup. No Keith Moon, still awesome.
And yeah, that's that emotional stamp.
Mm-hmm. And I got to see Joe Strummer a half a dozen times since then, but that was I lost my virginity. I became a punk. I didn't even know what punk was.
But yeah, you knew you were whatever that is. That's what I am.
That's me. That moment of recognition. But it's also it's a big part of depression, having to have this complete discography, this like these hallmarks of basically consumerism.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's not as punk as I think it is in my head.
Yeah.
It's actually the opposite. I should be out there stealing it. I should be pirating it online. That's the most punk thing you could do, probably. But like you said with the classical thing too, if I find something I love, I go headlong into it. Like how many times I own more records that were written by Rachmaninoff than I do by the Rolling Stones, and I love the fucking Stones.
Yeah.
Especially like.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that you really like classical, because there's not too many of us out there in the world. Jazz and classical,
I have a very deep affinity for, especially the darker ones, like Rachmaninoff, like.
Oh, so yeah, I should show you this. Let me take you to a little tour right here. I don't know if you can. Let me turn on the light here. See my. No, that's not on here. Oh, I got my happy light on here. Well, nothing's on, but I don't know if you can see that.
Kinda.
So that is a Rachmaninoff. That is a Billy Childish print.
Oh wow! Oh wow! I argue with everyone. Like people like name check their favorite classical artists, and to me, it always goes back to Rachmaninoff because it was so inherently dark.
Yeah,
so utterly depressed. I mean, more than just about anyone. Even like Mozart's Requiem, he wrote his own Requiem.
Yeah,
how sad is that? Not as sad as Rachmaninoff, not in my opinion. And I even like.
Well, it's funny because that the Mozart Requiem is the only Mozart piece I really like.
I own about no less than 16 different versions of it.
Oh my God, I have a bunch, and it is like. It's probably one of my 5 favorite pieces of music, which is weird because I don't really like anything else by him. Mm-hmm. It's too flowery, too pretty. But God damn, that is. And the Rachmaninoff Vespers, I fucking like. Oh,
that there's something absolutely resplendent about the utter misery and darkness of his music. I mean. I also like Wagner a whole lot, and I get flack for that because of the fact that Nazi Germany loved him so much, and he was nothing if not a divisive character in his own right. But the man could write.
Oh my God! Yeah, I've got just a beautiful ring cycle. Like you can't see it, but I think it's Schulte's ring cycle. It's so good. It sounds like, God, the beginning of that cycle, that whole, the first movement at the beginning is it's like 5 minutes of just like this, and I'm like, oh my God, this sounds like 20th century.
It's noise.
Yeah, it's
ambient
so
noise.
Great. Yeah. Do you know Don Howland? Do you know Don?
Yeah.
Do you ever listen to his classical show?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so good. Talk about dark.
And if I'm not mistaken, he played I forget the gentleman's name now. He is basically the godfather. He's an Italian, the godfather of noise music. The gentleman's name escapes me, but he made what is considered classical music with classical instruments, but made noise, like Merzbow level noise.
Yeah.
And he played it. He played an hour of it, and I was just, it took my breath away that he included it.
I listen to Don's show a lot when I'm going to bed. I just put it on. I put it on low. And he's a really good friend of mine, and it was interesting because he came into classical music really late, and he actually, his dad was sick, and he called me up and he said, "Bela, I'm going to be in Columbus. I need to get rid of my dad's classical CDs. Do you want some?" And I was like, Oh yeah. And he's like, "Because you're the only guy I know that likes classical music." And I was like, so he was living in North Carolina then, and I didn't hear from him. And then like 6 months later, he's like, "Hey, I'm in town. You want to get a coffee?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they wouldn't be like, "Hey, what about this classical?"
Yeah. Where's your dead dad's shit, bro?
And so he came over for coffee, and he's like, "Oh, you're probably wondering about like my dad's classical CDs." And I was like, "Yeah, I was." And he goes, "Well, I took some home, and I wanted to listen to some, and I love it." And he's like, "I started this show, and and he'll say, like, speaking of darkness, he's like, "This is the music that saved my life." And this is so, like, to sort of tie it all together too, I talked about my stepdad, and he's like dying. He's got a couple of months left, and how important music was for him, and he saw the Velvet Underground, right? Yeah. And he music was so important to him. And a couple of years ago, I was visiting, him and my mom, and he said, "Bela, do you know this guy, Don Howland?" And I said, yeah, he's a good friend of mine. He goes, "Yeah, his name sounds familiar." He goes, "I've been listening to his classical show." And he's like, "I never cared about classical music before." And they've become like pen pals, right? And it's interesting because Steve, my stepfather, and I would like bond over, music, but it was like, again, like Neil Young or The Clash or Dylan or whatever. Mm-hmm. And now we talk about, because I said, "Oh, Steve, I got this Hillary Hahn." He goes, "Oh God, I love her. She does this. She's a big champion of Silvestri, the Ukrainian composer." He's like, "Yeah, she is terrific." And he goes, "Yeah, Don plays her all the time." So it's so weird how it's the connection, right?
It's crazy that you brought up Silvestri too, because like, talk about accomplished everywhere. Like film, you kind of can't escape it. You
Yeah.
kind of can't escape it. And I think there's always going to be a place for classical music because that form has withstood centuries.
Yeah.
There are pieces that I still listen to that existed 300 years ago almost.
Yeah. Like the Pergolesi Stabat Mater.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I go back to that it's like Mozart's Requiem. It's like, I hear those things and I just like, they do bring me to tears. They literally, after I got my divorce, right after I got my divorce, I took my son to see Mozart's Requiem. And I bawled the entire time. And he was like, Dad. I mean, he was like, I don't know, he was like 10 then. 9 or 10, and he was like, Dad, it's kind of embarrassing. I was like, I'm like, we can go with
it, Dad. I have that attachment to jazz too. I really do. There's just and this is entry level stuff. I mean, I shouldn't even be proud that I champion this record because it is, for hard bop jazz, it is the entry level record. It is like pedestrian. I don't care. It's an all-star tour de force, and that would be Miles Davis's Kind of Blue, because you have John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley. They're all on this record, and they didn't write it. They picked them. Miles picked a mode. We're playing in this key, this beat, go. And it is just a juggernaut of a piece of music. I don't think things like this happen anymore. As much as I love music, as much as I love punk rock and many styles of music, like I love Kendrick Lamar, but this stuff is not happening at this level. It's astounding.
I think that goes back to, the beginning, like when we were talking of connection. How do people connect?
Yeah.
And there's something very different than sitting down with coffee or even beer or whatever it is and talking and conversing with people. Or in that moment too of like putting on a record and listening to it, where everybody has to be absorbed in it. There's no phones, there's no nothing, and you're connecting, because that's where the creativity sparks. Once you have that, right, and you're opening up and sharing ideas. So even in the process of making records now, people are making, my friend Ryan, who plays drums for a ton of different people, like his side gig is he provides beats for people. Or somebody needs a drum fill and he records it and sends it to them.
Yeah.
And it's great because he makes a living that way. But if you asked him, like, Ryan, what is your favorite thing? It's like, when he plays drums for Riley Walker.
Yeah.
It's like, when I'm playing with Riley and this is what we're doing and we go off, he's like, that's when it's magic. Because they're as a unit, but we don't have that. When I meet my daughter, she's on her phone. I'm like, honey, let me take you out for lunch, and she's on her phone. And I get it. Like, I think for me, I have to be very intentional with the time I'm going to spend. It was funny the other night. My girlfriend. Because I play a game. I play a stupid game on my phone, right? And she said she came into the living room, and I was having a really bad day, and she's like, "Oh, you're on your phone." And I remember I was like, but actually what I was doing, I was looking up some obscure composer, some Finnish composer. His name is Razanavkov or something like that, and because I can't see worth a shit like you, right? Yeah. Like I hold it up here and I'm like, I'm trying to find this piece of music. God damn it. It makes me feel like I'm with the world.
That 9 times out of 10, if I'm on my phone and I'm intent on it, I'm looking up some really obscure horror film or a novel or music, and my wife will just walk by and she's like, "Are you gonna eat that?"
Yeah.
Because that's where I'm at. I'm like,
yeah.
It's just, thankfully, I am not my daughter's age where everything, as far as like my personal life, is broadcast via this. But man, I'm getting damn close.
Yeah.
Podcasting and still playing in a band at my age, it's a tool that I can't escape. But
well, I think it's great that you do it. Like, yeah,
I have to. If I feel like if I'm not doing things of this nature, being creative, I'll probably go to a much darker place than I normally would.
Yeah. We gotta be out there doing it, right?
When your book came out, it came out on Don Giovanni.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that struck me as well, because that's a label that is still 1,000,000% baseline punk rock in the purest form.
Yeah.
Still politically 1,000,000% on the level.
Yeah.
Socially conscious. Every band that comes out on there is vetted. It's all on the level. You couldn't have chosen a better route. You know what I mean? Like, it's bulletproof. Are there labels that care that much anymore? I always wonder, like, I still love stuff that comes out on like Revelation or even Epitaph now and again, not much, but now and again. I don't know who's really doing it like that anymore. I would think there would be some young guys out there who are really carrying that flag.
Yeah, well, I think Joe's aesthetic is like, it's pure, it's respectful. He puts out things that are important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he puts out, like, he's not making a dime off some of these things, but it's important to get it out there. It's risky. It's dangerous. It takes courage to invest in that, as somebody has a record label, like, and not only that, it's a lot of fucking hard work.
Yeah.
And, he's a professor.
Mm-hmm.
So I was obviously so grateful that he was like, let's do this book. And I resisted it for several years. I have this blog, and so much of the book comes from that.
Well, yeah.
And the first time I met him was at an event here in town that a publisher here put on $2 radio, and I just met Joe, and I mean, I knew Don Giovanni, and he was like, "Hey, I really like your blog,"
mm-hmm.
and I was like, "Oh, well, thank you." Like, I mean, I wasn't thinking that, and he's like, "If you ever want to do a book, let's talk." And I was like, that sounds like a lot of work.
I mean, I remember reading your blog, like, I was probably 20s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's been around for a while, and but part of it too is my resistance, realizing, and this was like, took the book to come out, was there's this, so I'm totally DIY, like, and people, my girlfriend is a writer, And other people say, God, you just like put it out there. Like you're the second chapter is your suicide attempt, and the first chapter is a blowjob.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And they're like, God, you're brave. And I'm like, well, actually, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like, I'm comfortable enough. Like, I don't care that much. Like, but what I do care about is being rejected. Like, I don't care if people don't like it or not. Like, I really don't. But the fear is, God, if we do this as a book and nobody cares.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole other set of commitment with a book or a record of something tangible than just saying, this is how it is. I'm doing this unedited thing I wrote in an afternoon up on the internet, right? Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
There's something brave, but also very cowardly in that. And so I don't think I was at a point where I was ready emotionally to commit to a book. I mean, and it was like, God, it does seem like a lot of work. Like what I'm doing is there's no commitment. I write whenever I want to write. I write whatever I want to write about. I don't have to get anybody's opinion on anything.
Because it's not commodified.
But that process made me a better writer. I mean, I think, and I actually, the best writing in the book are things as the book was coming together. Lisa Carver edited it, and she would say, you need to write this. This is really unanswered here, and you need to write this. And like, so when I do readings for the book, there's a couple things I always read. And I find myself a lot going to those either complete rewrites of something or things that I wrote specifically because of her. And not to like toot my own horn, but sometimes like I just did a reading for Columbus Public Library, and I read this thing, and I literally wanted to go, I fucking wrote that.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, having followed, your blog for as long as I did, I think I mentioned that to you before. I've been following your writing for a very long time. I think what really struck me about the book was not necessarily the nonlinear aspect of it, which I appreciated, because it, even though it jumps around as far as time periods, it follows an emotional through line. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, you're taking a trip through a psyche, and we don't remember things chronologically. We remember feelings and
emotions.
That rabbit hole is completely separate from a calendar. You know what I mean? That's I think what was really prescient about it was that fact that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was the intention.
Like you're getting an unfiltered shot of human experience, the way it was meant to be felt.
Yeah.
And that's the real thrust of the book, that and this kind of like doomed sort of romance and the love affair with music. Mm-hmm. that is like repeated and just kind of reverberates throughout the entire thing. It's just music and love and tragedy, and that's everybody's life.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm writing a book now on my mom, and
well, your mom was a revolutionary.
Yeah, she really was. And a lot of things, because she died last year, and there was just a lot of things that sort of came out with her, a lot of family secrets, and so I don't know, I've got like 40,000 words that I've written, And it's a lot of it is, you know, I think about, you know, as a kid who grew up somewhat chaotically and there was abandonment and trauma and those sorts of things, but also like the things that my mom lived through, and the things that she had to do, a lot of the decisions she was sort of forced to make because, you know, she didn't go to college until her 30s. You know, she had my sister when she was 18, 19 years old. So, and she was a bohemian. She was a rebel. She was, right after she graduated high school, she moved to New York City to live with some theater guy. Like crazy, right? So, you know, you grow up in that as we grow up, like that's our parent, right? And then having the sort of stereotypical ideas of what a parent should be. And then having that rebellion and not understanding, but like, you know, as she was dying and like family secrets sort of came out and, you know, I got her depression. Like that's something she gave me.
Yeah.
So I've been writing that and really looking at, you know, I think it goes back to the connection and loss of connection. It's fucking dark. Like it is really dark. And I'm not, I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, well, what's your mom going to think of it? They didn't know my mom was dead. They were like, and they were just like, what are you writing? I was like, this is what I'm writing about. Like, there's some pretty like heady stuff in this. You know, just the fact that what women have to live through, and especially of other generations of making a lot of choices that because that was it. That was their option.
Yeah.
And you weren't allowed to talk about it. I mean, you could not talk about those choices you had to make or what you suffered, right? So yeah, and so I said, yeah, it's pretty dark. Like, you know, I'm not sure what's going to happen with it, but they said, well, what's she going to think? And I'm like, it doesn't really matter. And like, how can you say that? You're writing about your mom's life. And I said, well, she's dead.
She's dead.
Yeah. You know, what I have to be mindful of is like, what are my siblings going to think?
Yeah. But I think ultimately, you know, the scant things I know about your mother, I gleaned from the book. And in my opinion, a person of that mindset probably lived loud and proud and wouldn't care.
Yeah. No, I think she said she uncovered some of the secrets before she died. I mean, it wasn't easy for her, but because I think she wanted us to know this is what her life is. This is what life is. And we don't have to run away from it, you know. And she was somebody who ran away from a lot of things, you know. But in a weird way, like for me, I try not to do that. Like I try to run towards.
I mean, and that's an important thing because a lot of learned behaviors, you know, they're terrible habits that we pick up from our parents. Like, you know, addiction, for example, is a big one for me. I'm the son of an alcoholic. There's, you know, my coping mechanisms are these learned bad habits.
Yeah.
Also, the dichotomy of that is my dad was very bad at some very fundamental things, but he was also terribly good at some fundamental things. He was very loving, very affectionate, but he's also very violent and very like dark-hearted. It's, you know, we forget that our parents are just people.
Yeah.
And as their children, it's difficult to forgive them that until we become much older and more world weary.
Yeah. Yeah.
But ultimately, I see now, dude tried his best, and he loved me, and I love him, and he fucked me up, and that's what parents do to kids.
Yeah. And we get to a place where we're okay with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think ultimately, being parents ourselves now, in the wake of that, we just try to do that little bit better so that they don't screw their kids up as much as we got screwed up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's the win.
Yeah. 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 It's just what it is. Yeah. I think that's it. I got to go to bed soon.
Go to bed. Listen.
Is that okay?
That's more than okay.
This has been awesome.
I have loved this conversation. We didn't fall into anything preordained. It happened organically and beautifully, and I thank you for it. I think.
Oh no, thank you. I'd love to just hang out and talk.
I would too, actually, because we have a lot in common.
Yeah, we really do. And I thank you so much again for the kind words about the book and music. I mean, Jesus Christ, we could probably talk music forever, and hopefully someday we'll be able to listen to some together.
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. So don't.
And so, where are you at? Where are you in Pennsylvania still?
The Scranton area, yes.
Oh yeah, is that where you grew up too?
Yeah, sadly. But I'm here because my mom's here, so that's what it is.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah. That's great. Well, maybe next time I drive to New York, I'll drive through. So it's northeast of Harrisburg.
Northeast of Harrisburg. Yes, I'm. Gosh, like 2 hours south of New York and 2 hours north of Philadelphia. So
is it kind of near Lehigh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very similar locale.
Well, I'm supposed to go out there in Memorial Day weekend. So I might actually try to do a reading in Philly, but maybe stop by and get a cup of coffee or something.
That would be heavy. That would be very heavy. Don't lose my contact info.
No, I won't. Okay, have a great night.
You as well.
Okay.
Bye, brother.
Good night. Thanks. Bye-bye.
And there you have it, folks. As you just heard, Bela and I will be spending a bit more time together, and I think that's only right. Boy, this was an emotional little episode, wasn't it? Bela's kind of incredible. I urge you to go out and get a copy of his book. It really is, a light in a darkened corner of a part of my youth that I think most of you would find really interesting. Although I didn't live his story, it is vastly similar to mine. With that being said, he's been Bela. I've been Peter. You've been beautiful. And this has been the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. Take care of yourselves, everyone, and have a great night.